never do this. Good girls don't do this. Good girls are agreeable. Good girls smile when they're in pain.
Привет, чувак. We're going to talk today about a story of a girl who learned to say no to her narcissistic abuser. And it was very, very difficult for her to do that. In this story, we're going to call this woman Ekaterina. And she was raised in a fairly religious environment to wealthy Russian parents in St. Petersburg. She then went to London to study medicine at the age of 18. As a child, she'd done ballet, she played the piano, and she'd sang. And she'd been encouraged when she was younger to be a good girl. So she'd received instructions from on high, from parents, from church, from institutions, from school, that would tell her, be a good girl. And within this rule was implicit things like being agreeable, because of her ballet training that was very hard. She was trained to cover the pain on her face, and she would smile when she was suffering. She was hyper agreeable, and she was never pushy or demanding, she was instructed by her mother to believe that if she openly asked for what she wanted, it was seen as pushy and masculine and aggressive and non-desirable. She arrives in London. She's been well educated and she speaks fluent English. She speaks English with grammar that's better than most English speakers from England. And she does very well in medical school. She joins all the societies. She continues to dance. She continues to sing. And she is a good A-grade student. But she misses home. She misses where she's from. She likes English people. She likes the university that she's at. They're good people, but there's just a little bit of home that's missing there. And she meets a man, and his name is Vasily. So E meets Vasily. Now, Vasily is not well-raised. He's not particularly educated. He's not halfway to being Russian nobility. He's a little bit more street. But he's fun, he's funny, and he's got this charisma, this charm about him that makes him very, very appealing. And above all else, he is Russian. So she knows that if her parents knew she was hanging around with a boy like Vasily, they wouldn't be happy because he was from, let's say, a different class, if we frame it in gentle language. Vasily at first is very, very charming and lots of fun to be around and feels like home. So this is like a dream come true because inside of her, there's an ache. It's homesickness, and it's also just this sense of loneliness, like she's not really understood. But Vasily, for all of his faults and the fact that he is a rough, half a gopnik, like a chav or a roadman, a street type of a dude, he gets her. He understands her. So with him, she feels seen. She feels seen. Now, oh dear, I'm trying to draw an eye. Jacob, please help me. Oh, wow, that is just terrible. Look, nobody's paying me for my art, my drawing skills. Trust me when I say that's an eye. It is, I swear it. So she feels seen by him. And there's this recognition, and it becomes very powerful. It becomes very addictive. She can't see him all the time. He can only see her at intervals because he's busy with his other work, which he always jokes about. If she says to him directly, what is it that you do? He tells stupid jokes. He puts on the act of being like a Russian gangster. And he's like, oh, I'm busy selling guns. I'm busy selling drugs. And she knows that's a joke and they both laugh, but he never actually tells her what it is that he's doing. Time goes on and they grow closer. And Vasily changes, or from her perception, it seems that their relationship dynamic starts to change. And it seems to her that she's being told that this change from the ideal, pleasant charm and love and romance and great sexual, erotic connection from the beginning, that she's failing him. Just little looks and glances, people's faces sometimes. She just feels a little bit criticized by him. She feels like she's not living up fully to his expectations. And oddly enough, this feeling of failing and not being good enough is familiar. This is the environment that she was raised in, where only absolute pristine perfection would gain her any kind of love or validation or attention or the sense of being seen from her parents. As the story goes, Vasily goes from being passively neglectful and critical to eventually becoming abusive. There are cycles where he is charming and everything is wonderful to when he is enraged. And when he's enraged, she is absolutely terrified of him because she doesn't really know what he's capable of doing. She feels as though she's put herself in a situation with him in a foreign country where she has no family and she has no friends from back home to support her. And she's also done it behind her parents' back. She's done it behind her family's back. She's done it behind her St. Petersburg clique of private school friends' backs. She can't really tell anybody about this rough, half a street guy, Vasily, because it would bring shame to the name and it would bring shame to the family. If her father found out, he would go berserk. And if the mother found out, what Ekaterina fears is that she would treat her with derision and basically have the attitude of, I always knew you were a scumbag and scum gravitates to scum and that's why this is happening. So Ekaterina is alone with the burden of the abuse. And so Ekaterina is now carrying the burden. And she starts to feel the guilt and shame of his abuse, oddly enough. So when Vasily is abusive to her, she feels guilty and ashamed on his behalf. Eventually, the abuse becomes at times physical. He pushes her. When he's drunk, he'll grab her sometimes and shout at her. And he's never struck her, but once he's grabbed her by the hair and pushed her away, it's starting to get a little bit physical. And every time that kind of thing happens, she just feels overwhelmed with this burning guilt and burning shame. And like she has to carry the burden of this secret relationship because she feels that she's created it. She's the cause of it. Time goes on and she starts to get sick. When she was younger, she had some body dysmorphia issues as a result of the pressure that was placed upon her to look and act a certain way. In ballet, they were weighing the little girls every time they came to class and were telling them if they'd gone overweight that they needed to lose weight. So they got these toxic instructions into the heads of these little girls at a very, very early age. If she made mistakes during her piano lessons, if she made mistakes during her singing lessons, she was punished very, very harshly because the people who were teaching her believed, well, greatness comes from pressure. We have to be strict. We have to be very, very strong with you so that we can get the absolute best from you. But all of that left her with this sense hanging over that she fundamentally wasn't good enough and that she felt guilty and ashamed. She got used to feeling guilt. She got used to feeling ashamed and she got used to feeling not good enough. Her eating habits deteriorate. She starts to cope a little bit with alcohol more and more. She feels so anxious in the mornings before she goes to her classes at medical school that she'll start the day off with like a little bit of alcohol, which she washes down with orange juice, and then she eats chewing gum, hoping that nobody can smell it on her. They can smell it on her because her stomach is empty and she smells off because she's not physically well and it's just coming through her pores. She's terrified that people will see, just by looking at her, the terrible, terrible thing that she's gotten herself into, this terrible burden of guilt and shame that she's gotten herself into in this relationship with Vasily. Now, eventually, some of her English friends notice that things aren't going well. They ask her if there's a problem with Vasily, and she always says, no, absolutely not. Everything is fine. He's wonderful. It's just that I'm a little bit homesick. But they don't believe her. And so they ask her if she would consider getting some help. And she tries with the counselor who's on campus, and they talk around in circles about how she feels about the various situations that she's in. She tries with a psychotherapist, and it really doesn't do that much good for her because she can't tell the psychotherapist the truth about the situation that she's in. Not that she wants to lie, but her relationship with how she truly feels is intrinsically damaged. She's not a person used to saying, I feel this and I don't like it. She's never, ever said that in her life. She has no training for being able to connect with how she feels and then saying, I feel sad, I feel like shit, I don't like this relationship, and I don't like it, because she's never done it before. The time that we find her here, she's now 23 years old. Neuroplasticity is still very, very high. She eventually finds somebody who is not a psychotherapist, not a counselor. He seems to be, in fact, a little bit like Vasily. He's charismatic and a bit of an oddball and a bit of a rebel, and seems to be somewhere in that half a gopnik sort of status. But she hears him talk at university a few times, and he has some ideas around emotional trauma from childhood and emotionally abusive relationships, and she starts to listen to him. Eventually, she gets help from him, and he helps her to break this cycle. And this is how he does it. He tells her to look at what the instructions she received from parents and church and school, all of the authority, all of the higher up authority in her childhood. He says to her, do you know that you were given instructions? And she says, yeah, of course I was given instructions. He said, do you know that you were entrained to obey authority? And she said, yes, of course I was entrained to obey authority. But are you aware that some of these instructions that are running inside of your head now are running non-consciously and against your consent? They run without your consent. You didn't put them there. And the whole notion of consent is alien to her because nobody ever asked her whether she wanted what she was getting. They just told her, that is what you will get. This is what is necessary for you to be a good person. He says these instructions that come from higher authority in childhood function as a kind of a command center. And we all have them. There is a command center that runs inside of everybody's head, and it's giving instructions all day, every day, as to what it takes to be a good person. This weird, non-psychotherapist guy who swears a lot and is vulgar and smells funny and is a bit sweaty, he's telling her that there's something inside of her head that's called a superego, that it functions as a command center that tells people from on high, as a parent to a child, as an authority figure to a supplicant, in a master-slave dynamic, what the person needs to do. So you have a person, I'm drawing again, Jacob. Oh, brace yourselves, ladies and gents. Here comes another picture. Give it a little nose. There we go. A person walks through life and it's controlled by this command center that's called the superego. It tells you what you can do and what you can't do. It tells you what the limits of your potency are. So you have a certain number of things you are allowed to do. And if you try to step out of the limits that were enforced upon you by authority figures in childhood, the superego punishes you. And how does it punish you? It punishes you with negative emotion. What are the worst emotions a human being can experience? I wonder if you guys know this at home. I won't tell you straight away. Just take a few seconds to think. What are the worst emotions, psychologically the most burdensome? Hatred, resentment, guilt, and shame. These emotions, when carried across time, have the most deleterious and damaging effect on the person's psyche, on the person's self-confidence, and on their self-image. To carry resentment, to carry rage, to carry hatred, to carry guilt and shame across time does huge amounts of damage. It's extremely stressful. So he teaches her this, and she says, so is what you're telling me that I need to figure out how to say no to Vasily? And this weird guy says, no, I don't care whether you say no to Vasily or not. And she's like, but that's where the abuse is coming from. And he says, and I'm not sure if he's right or not, this weird guy who's not a psychotherapist says, that's not where the abuse is really coming from. And she's outraged. She's really, really upset by this. She starts to say, she has this conversation with him, and then she walks away from it, and he's like, she's thinking to herself, Ekaterina's thinking to herself, is this guy telling me that the abuse is coming from me, that I'm doing this, that this is my fault, and it's not coming from Vasily, who, handsome, charming, nice, pleasant, and then turned. It was a bait and switch. She starts saying to herself, no, I know I was conned. I was conned by this guy. And now this other stupid man, now she has two stupid men in her life who are giving her instructions, more instructions as if she needs more of them. And one of these plonkers is saying, no, it's coming from inside of you. I don't care whether you say no to Vasily or not. She's very upset. She sleeps on it. She thinks about it. She goes back to him and she says, the fact that you would tell me that this is coming from me and not from him is dangerous. I'm very, very angry and very disappointed with you. And he says, that's great. That's great. You've now told me that you're not happy with something that you're experiencing, and you've not really been able to do that before, have you? And she goes, oh. That's the first time in her life she's given negative feedback to somebody to their face and said, you said something to me that I don't like, and it makes me upset. She registers that, and then she says, but are you saying, tell me the truth, is this my fault or is this Vasily's fault? Who do I need to say no to? And this strange man that she's met, who's not a psychotherapist, says, it doesn't really matter whose fault it is. And again, she's outraged because she has a sense from her childhood of justice, of right and wrong, of good and evil. Some of these concepts have come from her reading of Russian philosophy, her reading of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, and from the Orthodox Church. Of course, somebody is to blame. And the strange man says to her, yes, and that's an interesting philosophical discussion, but you're in a situation right now. You're stuck here, bonded to this man that you don't want to be bonded to, in a relationship that makes you feel perpetually like you're failing and like you're not enough, and in which you carry the burden of guilt and shame for his wrongdoing. That's where you are. And I'm here to help you get out of that. And she says, okay, fine. For the sake of a philosophical exercise, what are you telling me I really need to do? This man taught her the key to her freedom and the key to her escaping narcissistic abuse, not just from the one man, not just from Vasily, but from all men and all people everywhere at all times, lay in the following thing. And it's very, very simple. It was the capacity for her to say no to these instructions inside of herself. It's not really about saying no to Vasily. Ekaterina needed to learn to say no to all the things she'd learned in her childhood, this command center of superego injunctions that was making her feel guilt and shame. That's what she needed separation from. Saying no to Vasily, all that would have done is trigger guilt and shame. He would have reversed victim and offender. He would have Darvoed her. He would have made her feel like she was being hypercritical. He would have made her feel like she was being bitchy, pushy, demanding, all the things her mother told her since she was a little girl. Never do this. Good girls don't do this. Good girls are agreeable. Good girls smile when they're in pain. It would have done nothing. She would have just gone through a cycle of saying no, but not meaning no, no. And then Vasily turning it around and her recarrying the burden of his abuse and exploitation of her. What this strange man was saying is that you've got to create a gap between the command center, instructions and injunctions that are coming down from on high and who you are. Who you are. There is your authentic adult self, and then there is the command center. This is how he explained it to her, and then he gave her a phrase to remember so that she would always remember what she needed to do in the future. He said to her, over there, on that side of the room, there is a rusty old robot. And that robot is playing recordings from the past. It is not smart. It has no power other than to play recordings triggered by stimuli in the environment. So if there is a trigger in the environment, the automatic response of the automaton, that is that rusty old robot, Soviet era robot, is to play these recordings. You're a bad girl. You should keep smiling when you're in pain. Good girls don't do that. You should do as you're told at all times. If somebody older than you tells you to do something, you obey. If a man tells you to do something, you obey. That's the rusty old robot. And it's in the corner of the room. Soviet era. It's a piece of shit. And all it can do is Pavlovian style conditioning. Russian style conditioning. You remember Pavlov's dogs, they would hear a bell ringing and they would be fed food. They hear a bell ringing, they would be fed food. They hear a bell ringing, no food, they start to salivate. Why? Because they anticipate food is coming. Stimulus response. A neural pathway is created. That's how dumb the rusty old robot is. He said, me and you, we're stood here and we're in our adult ego state. So we are capable. We are present. We are adults. We have all the resources, all the experience, all the knowledge that we've brought right here, right now. Don't we? And she goes, I suppose so. In that side of the room, there is a small girl. There's little Ekaterina. Little Ekaterina. And that old robot is sending her messages that are freaking her out, that are making her feel bad, that are making her feel upset. All the guilt and all the shame and all of the sense of you don't have a right to do things. You don't. So her saying no to someone would be outside this circle of potency. She has no right to say no. She has no right to stand up for herself. She's only allowed to people please. She's only allowed to serve the needs of other people. That's what she's trained to do. And that old robot, rusty, Soviet era robot, stupid, we'll call him Pavlov. Not that Pavlov is stupid, we'll call that robot Pavlov, is sending messages to Ekaterina. And she says, as any rational adult would, Ekaterina doesn't exist anymore. That you're talking about me as a child. And he says, the strange man who's not a psychotherapist, she does still exist. She does still exist. And she's still being impacted and terrified by what's coming from that robot. And she goes, great, so you've put me in a doom cycle where a robot that's repeating negative phrases from my childhood is terrifying the child side of me and putting it into a state of panic, a freeze response, a fawn response, so that when people are abusive or boundary pushing, she just goes into submission. And he says, yes, but we are here. There is a third state. There is a third state. We as adults can stand in between the rusty old robot and the child, and we can say, Shut the fuck up. Shut up. Stop. No, that's not true. We can push back against the rusty old robot and its recordings, and we can protect the child. We can break the cycle if we choose to. But I can't do it, he explains to her, from my child state, emotional, vulnerable, in a childlike trance. I can't have the child say no. I have to show up as an adult for myself, the person I am today, which is more than capable of doing this, as imperfect as I am, as imperfect as you are, to say, no, stop. You could turn to the child and say, that's not true, by the way. You don't have to listen to that. You don't have to do what a Vasili or any institution or any person tells you to do just because it makes you feel bad. This is a trick that's being played. This is a trick that's being played on you. You're desperate to feel seen. You're desperate to have this sense of connection because the adult ego state isn't there, communicating with the child in a protective way and saying, what do you need? I see you. You don't need tyrannical, fascistic, bullying, totalitarian types telling you what to do. You don't need that. You need you to ask you, what do you want? What would make you feel safe? And of course, the inner child is a child. It wants to play. It wants to do crazy stuff. You also have to say no to the inner child as well. You have to be disciplined. But when Ekaterina learned to practice this very, very strange, very unnatural feeling exercise, and sometimes she would even say it out loud, she'd hear the old robot, Pavlov, start up with a negative criticism, telling her she was a bad person, and she would train herself to stand up as herself in her adult state. She's still young. She's 23 in this story. And she could say, no, I don't agree with that. I don't believe that. She could turn to the child part of herself and say, you don't have to believe that. That's actually not true. I'm here to protect you. The first few times she tried it, it felt weird and didn't do much. She kept going for a week. She kept going for a month. And she noticed her emotional state became calmer and calmer and calmer. The more she practiced standing between the old command center and the vulnerable child state, the more she felt safe within her own skin to say no. And the strange man, who was not a psychotherapist, said to her, the key to all of this is that you feel safe with your child inside your body, saying no. And knowing as an adult, not as a child. A child is easily terrified. It's not hard to terrify a child. But knowing as an adult, there is no terrible fate that will befall you now. You're not a child anymore. You're not at the behest of your church, your school, your parents, whoever, a Vasili. You could say no, and you can be safe doing it. You have the right to say no. And he teaches her a phrase. He says, I don't want you to say no to Vasili. The only person I want you saying no to is that part of you that is sending you negative commands and telling you that you should feel responsible for other people's bad deeds. That old robot that's playing recordings that's making you feel like it's your fault when somebody is abusive to you. You say no to that thing and you offer protection and nurturing and guidance and reassurance to the childlike side of you. That's who you're saying no to. And she says, but I want to end this relationship with Vasili. And he says, just be patient, just be calm. Let's build from the inside out rather than making symbolic performative gestures that will send you into an emotional spiral and put you back with him faster than you can blink. He teaches her a phrase, and the phrase is as follows. I do not owe sincere communication to the terminally insincere, people who have proven to be liars and proven to be exploiting me. My problems are my problems. Your problems are your problems. If you have a problem, I can't help you with it. I can't. Which she finds surprising. She's like, but shouldn't we try and help each other with each other's problems? And the man, the strange man, who's not a psychotherapist, says, no, you shouldn't. You can talk to people. You can offer them your time and your attention. If they come with sincerity and they ask for a sincere, intelligent reflection of their scenario, yes, you can help them. You can help them move house. You can help them throw away old furniture, but you cannot help them move the emotional burdens that come from their past and from their childhood. That's their karma. That's their dharma. And if you try and get mixed up in it, bad things will happen. You can't touch it. And she says to him, but you're out trying to help people. And he says, no, I only work within my personal boundaries that I chose. I go so far and no further. I could do more for you. I could do more for him. There's a whole group of people you've seen me working with. I could give all my money and all my time to them, but I don't, do I? And she says, no, you don't. You actually have limits. And he goes, yeah, I do. And so should you. So should you. Limitless compassion for others, this strange man claimed, is a form of neurosis that people can call codependency or a fawning response. Zero compassion for others, this strange man claimed, is a form of toxic self-love called narcissism. He said you need to learn to recognize the difference between the two. Once Ekaterina had been through this process and she felt emotionally stable again, and she felt like she had more sovereignty over her own emotional state and how she felt about her place in life and who she was as a human being, she found that she didn't actually need to have the moment of telling Vasily no. He actually just kind of started to drift away. He spent less time with her. He was less interested in her. And it was almost as though he just wasn't getting the supply from her that he needed anymore. She wasn't a good source of supply because she wasn't easy to upset. When he tried to push her, when he tried to provoke her, she wasn't spiraling into an emotional flashback. She wasn't going into guilt and shame and resentment and hatred. Her emotions weren't spiking up and down. She would just calmly detach and say, okay, you're having an emotion and your emotion is your emotion in the same way that my emotions are my emotions. Over time, she ended the relationship with Vasily. She actually realized he wasn't very charming. He actually wasn't very handsome. He never was. It was just that she was very, very lonely and very, very isolated and alienated from her own self, from her own inner child, and completely at the mercy of a rampant, tyrannical robot superego. She was desperate when she met him. She looked back at the beginning of the relationship with Vasily and she was rolling her eyes. She was like, God, the things I thought that were true, the things I believed were necessary, it was nonsense. My head was filled with nonsense. My perception of the world was upside down. And she said that to the strange man, who was not a psychotherapist. And he said, yes, because when people are very, very emotionally dysregulated, their perceptions warp. Once you're emotionally re-regulated and you feel safe inside of your own skin, you can simply learn to say no. But the first person you need to be saying no to is yourself. And it's that part of yourself that keeps criticizing you and telling you you're only worth being in abusive, nasty, exploitative relationships. That, my friends, is the story of Ekaterina and Vasily and the strange man and what Ekaterina learned. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.